Morning. I don't have fancy slides, and a lot of the topics that I otherwise would have covered in terms of interest in public policy, fortunately, have already been raised. But I was asked to give we received the invitation from Brookfield to come and give an update on what Vector was doing. They asked for our president and CEO, and I said he's traveling for research, but I'm happy to be your silver medal. We were asked to cover sort of what's going on at Vector, and so we started in March 30th of last year. It was a government announcement in a space that was bare concrete and ductwork. We had 0 employees, and it was a corporate structure that existed on paper. And we are now in a stage where we have an operational space. We had 0 staff last year, now we have 18. We started with 6 faculty, now we have close to 20. We have run 3 of our endless summer school sessions, which are our flagship industry interactions between technical people and researchers. They were attended by over 150 attendees across different parts of industry and our sponsors. We've been running pitch days where we connect innovative small startup scale-up firms with large enterprise companies as potential clients, giving them exposure to their skills and their business models. We've run an AI for Executives workshop describing some of the business implications for AI and the transformational and disruptive nature that it will have across industry. And we've been running face-to-face meetings between our companies and our research staff where they connect directly one-on-one with their problems, and we've run 17 of those to date. And we've run about a dozen major speaking engagements, the largest of which was the Elevate Toronto event where we ran and helped contribute to Elevate AI, which was interesting because Mars told us after the fact that that was the largest event that's ever taken place in the Mars's history. And we said, oh, that can't possibly be true. And they said, no, it was, actually. And we've had about 200 plus company meetings, and we've signed 37 corporate agreements with our sponsors in a sponsorship model that, so far as we can tell, is essentially unique to Canada, insofar as we are jointly funded by the private sector, the federal and provincial governments in a way that is not a payment for goods and services. It's really to get Vector off the ground going. And we've also launched, in partnership with CFAR, the promotion and application process for a deep learning and reinforcement learning summer school that will take place this summer that will attract some of the best and brightest around the world. We already have to date 500 plus applications across 39 countries, and that number is skyrocketing. And so we've done all of that in the span of just about 1 year. And it was interesting that we told all of this to the provincial government, and they said, yes, but have you made any progress? And so it's an interesting model where the key takeaway that we have from Vector's perspective is that there's overwhelming demand. And it's a nice problem to have in that when you do all of these things in such a short amount of time, and you still get the question of, well, are you meeting the needs of what the innovation ecosystem requires? That's a nice problem to have because it's actually the sign of healthy ecosystem. And so I was also asked to give a few examples of where we see challenges in the public policy world. And I'm going to take a bit of a different tack in that my observation in working with Vector and some of the scientists over the last year and coming from a 10 plus years career in public policy, my observation is that none of the problems that we seem to be encountering are actually all that new. Now, what happens is that the common problems that have existed in public policy for decades are aggravated by AI, and there's an undue and disproportionate amount of public attention paid to those problems, but none of the problems are actually new. And what do I mean by that? So we fussed over, and there's a lot of media coverage. For example, earlier in the week there was a well-publicized, unfortunate first fatality involving a pedestrian in an autonomous vehicle, and for context, there's about 40,000 people who are killed each year on our roads, according to the National Safety Council. And then to place that in context, just for reference while we're counting, it's about 610,000 a year that die from heart disease in the US. And so we just, let's keep things in context. And then the other problem, especially coming from the public policy world, is that public policy, by its definition, is traditionally cross-cutting, and it's very deliberate and consultative, and that translates through to slow. And the danger that we have observed in this space, or the warning that we would give, is there are a lot of people in the public policy forum with tremendous goodwill, but they will have very strong opinions about technical issues that they don't necessarily properly understand when we put them in the same room as our research scientists. And so our ongoing advice to partners in the province and CFAR and elsewhere was, yes, these discussions are very important, but you need to have some people in the room who do this for a living, because some of the fears that are talked about, especially in the media, are not founded in reality. And we should not act shocked and surprised by this, because, again, it's my observation that this is not a new problem. New technologies can promise great things and they can prompt great fears. A great example would be Facebook. For those of you keeping track, their market cap was $545 billion in early January. It's now $481 billion today, because they've ran into a couple of challenges, let's say. And governments are, by their very nature, risk averse. And so there's the old classic joke, well, what day is it? And the private sector will tell you it's Friday, but they do it for free. The government will run a 2-month consultation process, and they'll tell you it's Thursday because they were being conservative in their estimate and they want it to be below the private sector forecast. And the political side will tell you it's Sunday because that's the aspirational target. And then the last observation I'll make is that as we've navigated and built Vector, we are keenly aware that there are many things in the broader public sector that are not well suited or well designed to deal with the current landscape of rapidly changing technology. The pace is accelerating, and we live in a world where we're supposed to abide, for example, by broader public sector guidelines for things like procurement and rules. But we are facing a competitive marketplace for high-performance computing hardware, where on account of things like cryptocurrency, the hardware just isn't available. And so you run a procurement where there are no bids because the bidders say, actually, we're not interested in the government's model of value for money. The cryptocurrency guys just buy it, and they are willing to pay top dollar. And so the market realities of the innovation ecosystem are such that many of the government programs and processes that we have were always intended for large firms. That is for good reason, because there is the expenditure of public money, but it means we also, and I thank Michael for raising this point so I don't have to cover it, but we have a whole bunch of personnel who are trained in things like economics, public administration, and they are less trained to evaluate things in the data science field and the associated implications. And so when people ask me, some of my colleagues in the public service, so what's it like to be at Vector and to work with these private sector partners, the other caution that I've given, or the thing that I usually say, is when you work in government and you work in a public policy or consultation process, especially for myself with a background in central agency, a ministry brings a proposal or an association brings you a proposal, you can generally hope that most often the other side is telling you the truth. And in the private sector, that is not always the case. And we have found ourselves in many negotiations over the last couple of years where you would come out of that room and just for clarity, they were flat out lying to us. And if we complicate that with people who are sophisticated in data science and can turn analysis and results in ways that some of our traditional public administration mechanisms are ill-suited and ill-prepared to evaluate, we're going to be in some serious trouble, because it turns out some of these people are very smart and they are not necessarily operating for the greater good. And so that's the caution that we give. And so in conclusion, I think we all generally agree that there's a high interest in AI and other disruptive technologies. And my observation is that there is a level of attention that is paid to him, but it's really a proxy for the level of apprehension about the cultural change that we are starting to undertake. We've generally observed that we think we're in the midst of one of the greatest change management exercises in the history of the human race, and it's only going to get worse from here. And we should not act shocked and surprised when people are nervous by that, because we have this observation as we work with our partners that large corporations and institutions are fantastically complicated. Turns out people are not. And if you tell someone we're about to undertake one of the largest change management exercises that you've ever experienced in your life, you might find that they say, well, hold up a sec. That is a great idea for my successor. because I'm going to retire in 2 years, and why don't we do nothing? And it turns out the guy before him said that, and the person before him said that, and the person before him said that. And so that's our observation just on public policy and a quick update on where Vector's at. Thanks.